Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. We have a lot actually to talk about regarding Black Ops 7, specifically the Dark Ether storyline within the zombies. Now I know that there is this giant discourse between the players and feedback right now through Activision where you seemingly can't say anything nice about Call of Duty, to be honest with you. You can partly say this is due to players finally having enough and Battlefield 6 also having a hand to play, but that's basically the general consensus that is floating around the internet at least recently. However, I've been following the zombie storylines all the way since World at War, and I've honestly just stopped playing multiplayer since MW19, so it's not that big of a deal for me specifically. Literally, I'm only getting this game for zombies. I don't care about campaign or anything really related to that. Anyway, I know I am late to majority of this stuff, but I always try to look and comb through everything I possibly can to get the facts right and deliver the truth, so just bear with me here. So if you enjoy the content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That would really mean a lot to me. And without further ado, this is everything we know so far regarding Black Ops 7 Zombies. So, the COD Zombies week that Treyarch had to delay is now seemingly firing on full effect. As of the time of this recording, they have already dropped several key details and info dumps regarding the map itself and what it could be entailed with, basically. Now, we know at the end of the Reckoning, regardless if you choose the Richtofen ending or the Sam ending, that Weaver, Carver, Gray, and Maya are sent into the Dark Ether and are found by a new version of not just Richtofen, but Tank Dempsey, Nikolai Belensky, as well as Takeo Masaki. Now, what's interesting about these four particular is that they are not Primus, neither are they Ultimus actually. Up until now, before we got this blog post, originally people were going off of the theory of they were from a different cycle that was never completed. Basing it off of this image here, where it looks like both Primus and Ultimus have merged and went into the Agartha to find Dr. Monty, which is something we did not do in any of Black Ops 3 or Black Ops 4. We also know that time works differently in the Dark Ether, proven when Samantha Maxis came back from the Dark Ether in Firebase Z. Although she was only in there for roughly 2 days, to her it was several months. This can be further backed up as when the multiverses banished at the end of Tag Vertoten, Victus wasn't instantly killed off and instead were simply swallowed into the Dark Ether. If you also want to believe that the telephone call and classify where you hear Stuhlinger speak about a place being dark, cold, and cockroaches everywhere caused by the cycle being broken and time being displaced, that would further cement that these four versions of Primus, Takeo, Tank, Nikolai, and Richtofen are from an offshoot of the cycle. However, those rumors, as well as the theories of what versions of these four could possibly have been put to rest since September 16th. First one we have here, if you skip past Gray, Carver, and Weaver, is Tank Dempsey. His bio reads, "This incarnation of Tank Dempsey is a battle-hardened US Marine who has most recently fought through the jungles of 1968 Vietnam with grit, sarcasm, and relentless will to survive. In this fractured reality, his distrust of his new companions and unfamiliar surroundings have turned this otherwise dependable soldier into an unpredictable wildcard of the group." Now, this tank is actually pretty interesting. You see, Ultimus Tank was a Marine during the height of the Second World War. After he was experimented on by Richtofen, he became a gung-ho, typical character of a soldier, basically. The Primus version of himself, while still patriotic to some degree, was a lot more calm and less stereotypical than his counterpart and was involved in the First World War. What's also interesting is that this version of Tank is actually more distrustful to his new companions and his surroundings. You see, both Primus and Ultimus Tank Dempsey always had one thing in common: their distrust to each of their versions of Richtofen. Ultimus Tank hated Ultimus Richtofen and vice versa, whilst Primus Tank didn't fully trust Primus Richtofen at first, but went along with him later and started to form a bond with him and started to trust him more as time goes on. Basically, to put, this version of Tank is basically a mix of both Ultimus and Primus Tank, but it's his own person as well, so it's interesting to see what we're going to learn and hear about his entire story when we play Black Ops 7. Now, this next iteration of the original crew we have here is Takeo Masaki. Now, unlike the previous versions where Ultimus Takeo was an Imperial Japanese officer during the height of the Second World War and was strictly honor-bound, and the Primus iteration of Takeo was a captain during the First World War and was not exposed to the schizophrenic nature of 115 yet, this Takeo actually comes from feudal Japan, specifically from the year 1591, and his bio reads as follows. Takeo Masaki is a disgraced ronin who wandered 1591 feudal Japan without a master or honor, carrying the weight of his exile as a yoke he cannot cast off. Bound by a code he only still barely believes in, he seeks redemption in the chaos of battle, his blade both a burden he must bear and a judgment on his enemies. Now, if we look into real-world history, we can actually learn a little bit more of Takeo Masaki through his description here, as it's basically confirming that he is a ronin. For those who don't know what a ronin was once a samurai who either lost their master, had no master to begin with, or they severed all links to the family and clan. A samurai became a ronin after the death of his master or fell out of favor with said master. If we go back to Takeo's description, it says that he is still bound to a code that he only barely still believes in, and he seeks redemption in the chaos of battle. My best guess is that this Takeo had once served a powerful lord that made him start to question the beliefs of the samurai, and something tragic happened because of it. He was cast out of the Lord's favor and became an outcast, seeking redemption for whatever mistake that led him to where he is right now, as we see him in the intro cutscene of Black Ops 7. This next version of Nikolai is nothing like we've seen from the previous iterations of Primus or Ultimus. While the Primus version Nikolai was a humble sergeant of the Red Army during the heights of the First World War and was a proud supporter of communism and a revolutionist, Ultimus Nikolai became a drunk after losing his first wife and the Germans advanced onto Soviet Russia, and his brother was killed in the Battle of Stalingrad. This version, however, has nothing to do with that, as his bio reads the following. The Soviet tank commander Nikolai Belinsky arrives in the dark ether from the brutal mountainous landscape of 1984 Afghanistan, where duty, disillusionment, and misfortune collided. Scarred by a war and haunted by both betrayal of his own decisions, he masks his bitterness with dark humor yet remains a steadfast warrior when shells begin to fall. Now, unlike Takeo, where we had a lot to go off of, we can piece together a few things going off of real-world history again. Now, we know he was a tank commander during the Afghanistan War in 1984, as the Afghan-Soviet War itself took place from December 1979 to February 8, 1989. So going off by that logic, we can assume that Nikolai was involved in the Afghanistan War and was sent to the Dark Ether 5 years before the war ended. The Afghan-Soviet War was a brutal conflict that led to the deaths of 1 to 3 million Afghani civilians and 15,000 Soviet soldiers. Until we know more and get more intel as the day goes by, we can only assume that this version, Nikolai, became increasingly disillusioned of how far the war was going and didn't think it was going in the right direction for the Red Army, as in the war, Russia had lost billions of dollars of the aircraft and other military technology. Now, the last one we have here is Dr. Edward Richtofen, whose description basically confirms that he is a blend of both Ultimus as well as Primus, basically. His description reads as follows. Dr. Edward Richtofen, a brilliant but unhinged scientist and hero of the Reich, finds himself torn from 1945 in a world where the Axis powers triumphed over the Allied nations. Shaped by ambition and tainted by corruption, he masks his innate sadism and considerable ego behind quick wit and a charming smile. He vows that reality itself will ultimately bow to his designs. Now, this is interesting for a few reasons. For one, if you remember those leaks that happened regarding the future of Black Ops 7 Zombies, it was said that one of the maps at the beginning is a map set in New York City where the Germans have dropped the bomb on it before the Americans did on Japan. My best guess is that this is through Edward Richtofen and the timeline he comes from, where the Germans actually won the Second World War. I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting pretty like major Earth X vibes from this Arrowverse, so I'm pretty excited for it, honestly. Now, when it comes to his personality in particular, this is where we can see both the mix of Primus and Ultimus basically merge into one. You see, Ultimus Richtofen was a member of the Illuminati and eventually became insane through much exposure of Element 115 and by touching the MPD on the moon, eventually driving him to complete insanity and becoming a megalomaniac, and he was obsessed with finding Agartha. Meanwhile, his Primus version from Dimension 63 had no such issues, as his sanity was still intact and he was only merely paranoid of Element 115 after seeing his best friend and father figure, Dr. Ludwig Maxis of Dimension 63, descend into madness after Samantha from the original timeline had contacted him. Now you see, me personally, I'm going to be playing these four more than Carver, Gray, Weaver, or Maya, as the four really didn't stand out to me a lot in the entirety of Black Ops 6 Zombies, and come on, it's the old crew, why not? Why wouldn't I play this stuff again, you know? Now, the next thing we have to talk about really is who is this villain we have for this game now, this shadowy benefactor that arrives after our 8 heroes meet in the Dark Ether and steal their life essence. Now, originally, the consensus was that during the events of Liberty Falls, Dr. Panos was communicating with Samantha Maxis after she sacrificed herself by heading into the Dark Ether to stop the Forsaken and Cold War zombies. However, with the confirmation of her dying at the hands of the Forsaken by the time we reach the Reckoning, we know this is no longer the case, unless, of course, the Forsaken was lying to us this entire time. Now, me personally, I think this is the same person who dragged Ava Jensen into the mirror at the end of MWZ. As this is not only the same mirror we see in Richtofen's office, however, in that entire sequence where we see him in the mirror when Ava was talking on the phone with Ravenoff, the mirror person has a strong resemblance to this person we see in the intro cutscene at Black Ops 7. Even if you look down at the hat and how his right arm appears to be carrying something, suggests this could be the same person who pulls Ava in the Dark Ether in the future. Now, the more popular theory is that this person is none other than Jeb Brown, the person behind the Pack-a-Punch machine who was responsible for sending the mining town of Purgatory Point, which is buried, through time and space, sending it underground in the year 2025 in Angola. This is backed up as that if you know that after the events of Tag der Toten, not everybody who was sent into the Dark Ether was automatically killed off. We know this in this Lost Souls radios we find throughout Outbreak and the entire events of Cold War Zombies. To simplify it, think of it like the Void in the MCU, where items from pruned timelines and universes end up. So the odds of this being Jeb Brown could still be on the table, as even in the Chronorium and the radios we find him buried, we have no direct confirmation that Jeb had died when the zombies attacked his home. Another thing we do know is that from the leaks is that apparently the new villain wants us to use the life force of the original 8 members of Primus and Ultimus to rebirth the new multiverse. It's pretty interesting whether or not this can even happen, as you can treat the end of Tag der Toten as the collapse of the old multiverse of not just World at War and Black Ops 1 to 4, but the collapse of all Call of Duty games previously for it, as there have been multiple moments in the new Modern Warfare, Vanguard, and Black Ops titles that basically confirmed and tie into the main broader storyline and Call of Duty as a whole, basically treating it as one shared universe. On the Modern Warfare side of things, we have the intel of Task Force 141 discovering the documents of Requiem's existence, which ties into Soap MacTavish, Laswell, and Ravenoff spearheading Operation Deadbolt in an effort to stop Victor Sakaya from mining Ethereum and selling it on the black market. During the end of Call of Duty Vanguard, after Task Force Vanguard stops Freisinger from escaping and looked through his documents in the plane, Polina and Task Force Vanguard discovered documents relating to Project Nova and Project Ether. This confirms that Freisinger had some sort of knowledge on Friedrich Steiner's experiments, Nova 6, and Erlich Vogel's experiments regarding the Ethereum that he found after ripping a hole in the Dark Ether in Moraska, Poland. And lastly, for the Black Ops side of the story, we know of course that Grigoria Weaver and Lev Kravchenko, two very important figures in the Black Ops campaigns, are directly tied and involved with Requiem and the Omega Group. We also know that the events of the Forsaken take place in the year 1985, while Kravchenko canonically dies a year later in the hands of either Alex Mason or Frank Woods in Afghanistan, meaning that he does survive the events of the Forsaken. Now, the last thing we need to talk about basically is the map itself. From what we learned through several leaks, the small snippet of gameplay cutscenes from the reveal trailer and YouTubers who got to play the game early, it's basically confirmed without a shadow of a doubt that this map, Ashes of the Damned, is going to be directly based on Transit. We know this as one of the leaked maps we have actual gameplay footage of is Farm, and Pano is saying that he wanted the Dark Ether and found places of nourishment and a farmhouse, obviously referring to the diner and Transit for Farm. Now, we know there's going to be a few new POIs on the map as well, such as the returning power station as well as the floating pyramid on the map. Now, if we go off the notion that the pyramid at the power station as well as Farm is 3 POIs, that leaves 3 left. However, we could also guess that one of the POIs returning is the bus station, as in one of the short videos that was released by Treyarch, we can hear the bus depot theme play on the car radio. Basically, think of this map as a really weird mix of Revelations, Transit, Turbinus, and the Void from the MCU, a mishmash of iconic maps from different time periods and points across the entire Black Ops storyline, basically for zombies. So, what do you guys think of what we know so far? Let me know in the comments. Again, I am so sorry for such a bad voice and how everything sounds cutty and stuff like that. I just have a really, really, really bad cold right now, but you know, when more detail comes out, I'll be covering it here. So with that being said, have a good day, guys. Take care. I'll talk to you later.